Everyone. There it is. Good morning. We are really excited to have you here this morning. We're gathered to talk about sewage entering our rivers, brooks, and harbors. So we probably don't need to tell you this, but contact with sewage is very bad for our health, from gastrointestinal issues to skin rashes and worse. And we also really want to get across the idea that CSO discharges into our water represents a sort of almost more spiritual type of harm as people lose their connection to their rivers and feel a sense that they're not able to recreate or enjoy their waters in the same way that they might be able to otherwise. And so once they get the sense that raw sewage might be flowing into the river, there is some sort of more integral harm there, a fundamental harm that is harder to quantify, but that we think is nonetheless extremely relevant. And so we want to establish that the state of CSOs in our state here is really not a abstract challenge. So in the past 24 hours, yesterday's rainstorms resulted in numerous CSO activations that lasted as long as 11 hours. So in 2023, the Charles River lower basin alone received over 70 million gallons of raw and partially treated combined sewage from 39 unique CSO activations. So this is a serious problem that we really would like to work on here in the Boston area, but notably, this is not a problem unique to the Charles or to the Boston area. Across the state, 2023 saw 3,089 individual CSO activations and a discharge of over 4 billion gallons across 18 communities. CSOs occur in places like Lowell, New Bedford, Springfield, and Fall River. And also, critically, there are disparate impacts to these discharges. Last October, CRWA hosted Nathan Sanders, a data scientist and climate justice design fellow at Harvard University, to discuss the disparate impacts of CSOs. As he said, in a just commonwealth, your zip code would not determine your sewage exposure, but unfortunately, in Massachusetts today, it does. Nathan's research reveals that CSOs are more common in EJ neighborhoods, that's environmental justice neighborhoods. He found that on average, if a watershed has 2 times as many populations with linguistic isolation, it will have 1.8 times as much sewage discharge. If a watershed has 2 times as many people in poverty, it will have 3.4 times as much sewage discharge. And disappointingly, if a watershed has 2 times as many people of color in Massachusetts, it will have 4.4 times as much sewage discharge. All these relationships are strong, statistically significant, and present a clear call to action for our state. So what's next? Well, CSOs are not the only form of wet weather pollution. They are a major challenge for achieving Clean Water Act goal of the fishable and swimmable rivers. Our region has seen major improvements over the past decades. Notably, the MWRA, the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, has come very close to meeting the 87% removal mandated by their long-term control plan. This is an incredible achievement. However, in recent years, unfortunately, progress has slowed. That's why CRWA and our watershed partners are proud to be announcing the launch of CSNO, a coalition designed to end discharges in Massachusetts. This will be a statewide coalition patterned on other successful efforts. The goal of the coalition is twofold. First, we would like it to serve as a hub for concerned citizens and organizations to share CSO information and submit photos, stories, and videos of CSO discharge events. These photos can then be used by advocates at all levels to viscerally demonstrate how necessary it is to take statewide action to address the CSO problem in Massachusetts. Discharge data doesn't express how disgusting it is to see toilet paper and trees or sewage flowing in parks and streets. We hope that the photos from districts across the state will help drive advocacy. Secondly, to rally around current legislation, consider omnibus CSO legislation and organize lobby days, much like has been done by other powerful coalitions such as Plastic Free Massachusetts. It's notable that a rising tide will lift all boats. By working here and across the state, we can bring attention to solutions and make it clear that no amount of raw sewage in our water bodies is safe, sustainable, or acceptable. So you can get involved now by reviewing and commenting on the long-term control plan here in the for Cambridge and the variants here in the Boston metropolitan area. The comment period will send out a little information after this webinar, but it is currently active and Mass DEP is soliciting feedback. So please do get involved. And like I said, we'll send around information to the webinar participants after we conclude. So CSO control in our area is entering a new era. In many ways, the low-hanging fruit has already been picked, and the same strategies that have been deployed in the past may not be adequate or cost-effective to close that final gap to climate-resilient CSO control. In the past, the focus has been sewer separation and increasing capacity at Deer Island treatment facility. Recent economic analysis from MWRA shows that while the separation is feasible, the upgrades in piping capacity at Deer Island would cost nearly $20 billion. So it's time for us to consider a different approach and look at alternate strategies for managing water where it falls and keeping flows out of our combined sewer system before they enter the natural environment. That's why we're happy today to welcome Kevin Shafer. Kevin has served as the executive director of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District since 2002. Kevin has a BS from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and an MS from the University of Texas. He serves on multiple boards and is the past president of the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, past co-chair of the Water Research Foundation, co-chair of the U.S. Water Alliance, and is a past member of the EPA's Local Government Advisory Committee. His leadership and experience has brought MMSD recognition from almost every major award in the industry, including the 2012 U.S. Water Prize. We are so honored to have him join us today to share his expertise. Kevin, I'll pass it off to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. There's so many lessons that we can learn from everyone, and being part of some of the organizations that you just heard that I've been part of has really been the focal point for me to learn from Boston, from Seattle, from Philadelphia on different approaches. But when you boil it down to the one approach that, as I was saying earlier, before we got on the call, that I've been preaching since I started, you really have to look at the entire watershed to make sure that you're addressing all of the components of the hydrologic cycle. As you also heard, I started in 1998 as head of engineering here, but then in 2002, I became the executive director. So it's taken a while. It takes time to make some of these improvements happen. And originally, we were focused on CSO management control. We've kind of stepped past that a bit now because I think we're doing pretty well there. And we're looking more at some of the climate change initiatives, which are going to drive more CSOs. So it's all interconnected because it's all part of that cycle that I talked about. So I'm going to go through some of the initiatives. Some of this may make sense. If it doesn't, we can ask questions at the end, and I'll try to address as much as I can. Next slide. That first slide, as we go forward, that was a green roof that we installed on one of our buildings. We're doing that throughout the Milwaukee area right now. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, MMSD, we're a regional government. We're a special district. So we're not part of the city of Milwaukee. We're not part of the county. We're a standalone government agency on our own. We provide both water reclamation and flood management to 1.1 million people in 28 different municipalities. The service area changes every day because we're adding or subtracting, but it's around 410, 420 square miles. And of that 420, about 26.5 is a combined sewer area. So if you look at this map, that hatched red area is the combined sewer system. The rest of the area is a separate sewer system. And it's just the way Milwaukee developed. It's an older city, and the combined sewers were here at the start of the city. And as we grew and the suburbans grew, communities grew, and the city grew, they moved to separate sewer systems. Next slide. We have two water reclamation facilities, Jones Island, which is right downtown Milwaukee, and South Shore, which is down in Oak Creek. On a normal day, each of these treatment plants will treat around 60 to 75 million gallons a day each. On a wet day, they'll go up to 300 million gallons a day each. So we'll go from 140 to 600 MGD on a heavy rainstorm. And the treatment process, oops, I'm sorry, that's fine. The treatment process itself is very similar to other places in the country. It's preliminary, primary, secondary disinfection. We do not have tertiary treatment here. Since 1926, we've been producing a biosolid fertilizer called Milwaukee Organic Nitrogen. You can probably find this in a Home Depot or a Lowe's or an Ace Hardware store in the Boston area. It's a natural fertilizer that we sell. In the last few years, we've been selling over $11 million of this product. It helps us offset our rates for our customers, and it's a sustainable way to manage our biosolids that we're producing at the treatment plants. Next slide. I'm from the great state of Illinois. I've been up here since, you heard, 1998, and when the Clean Water Act passed, my home state sued Wisconsin for CSOs. And it's probably the best lawsuit that we could have had because it forced us to do some things early in the early years to really address the combined sewer overflow system or situation. So today we have a deep tunnel. It's about 300 miles, or it's 300 feet below ground. It's 300 miles of sewer, and it holds about 521 million gallons of water. If you go to our website where we have a real-time dashboard that you can look at to see what the tunnel has in it, you'll see today that it's full. So the rainstorm that you received, it sounds like yesterday, we got on Tuesday and Wednesday, and really caused a lot of problems for us. Next slide. We've added 2 tunnels. That's part of that 521 since I've been here. We put in the Northwest Side Tunnel, which was 89 million gallons, and 27th Street Tunnel, which is 27 million. And I show these pictures because this is not easy construction. This takes a long time to design, to construct, and safety of the workers and the public is high on the charts when we're trying to do this work. Next slide. We also do just regular sewer work. This is the Harbor Siphons project where we built 4 new pipes under our harbor to deliver more flow to the Jones Island treatment plant so that we could treat more water, get the water to the treatment plant so we could treat it and reduce overflows. Again, very heavy construction, a lot of underground work. Next slide. And like Boston and everywhere else, we have infrastructure that's very old. This is a current project that we have. That pipe is still operational today. You would think it's going to fall in on itself, but luckily it has not. So we're in an emergency repair to the sewer to put a new pipe to replace this one. Next slide. I think I saw a chat question pop up. So since the tunnel came online in 1993, we've captured and cleaned 98.56% of all the water that's come into our system. And the federal government, as you all probably know, requires you to be greater than 85%. So we're well above that percentage. But I want this to be 100%, and we're working towards that using this watershed approach. Last year, 2023, we're at 99.7, I think it was, percent capture. We had 1 CSO last year. It was on the last day of February where we had like 1.5 inches or 2 inches of rain, but we had 10 inches of snow on the ground, and it was 50 degrees. So it all melted and hit us at the same time. We actually did have a CSO this week. It's the first one we've had in 13 months because of that rainstorm that sounds like you had as well. So we're all trying to stop them. We're all trying to do our best, but sometimes it comes down to dealing with a changing climate, but also finding the financing to do that work. Next slide. So in 2009, I decided that if I was going to stay on this job, I needed to create a vision for the future. I needed to lay a path for the Milwaukee area. So I wrote this vision in 2009, and my commission approved it in 2010. It took them a year to come around, but they did. And it's really got 2 parts. The left side of I think of it as 2 parts of your brain. The left side of my brain is the integrated watershed management, where we want 0 SSOs, 0 combined sewer overflows, 0 homes in the 100-year floodplain. We want to use green infrastructure and capture the first ½ inch of rainfall to keep it out of the tunnel, out of the sewers, and out of a CSO. And then we want to acquire land and keep it natural so that it does not induce more stormwater getting into the system and causing pollution. The right side of the brain is more on energy efficiency, trying to be 100% renewable, with 80% of that being self-produced by the plants, and then use some sequestration to help as well. And we established a baseline in 2005, and we want to reduce that baseline by 90%. We just last month passed an energy plan, which in the next 12 to 15 years will help us meet this 100% and 80% goal that we've established. And I should say the vision may be the best thing I ever did. It's hard to peak when 15 years, 16 years ago, but I kind of think this is one of the best things I did because it really laid the path for my staff to know what we should be doing. And where before I was continuing trying to push things, Now they're coming to me with ideas and pushing the discussion themselves. Next slide. Our climate's changing. We've seen it. The bottom right picture is the Kinnickinnic River. We've had people die on this river because it's a concrete lined channel that just whooshes this water through, and it's washed away. 2 years ago, we lost 3 people on the Kinnickinnic because of the flooding that you see like this. So we're trying to develop plans. We've got a resilience plan that was developed in 2019, a climate vulnerability analysis that was done in 2014. We're trying to mix strategies of mitigation and adaptation to try to address some of these issues that are facing us. Next slide. Just a couple slides on the climate resilience energy side. We built a landfill gas pipeline in 2012. It went online in 2014. And so now when it's not raining, when we're not running the deep tunnel pumps, our Jones Island plant will run off of landfill gas as opposed to natural gas or carbon produced electricity or coal produced electricity. So it's been a great project for us, and it's one of the big steps that we're using to get to that 80% self-produced goal. Next slide. So when we look at the left side of the brain on that vision, it really is looking at a watershed approach. On this map, you can see the red line. That is my sewer service area. And as I said before, it changes constantly. But we're at the downstream end of the Milwaukee River watershed. We have the Menominee, which is the orange-yellow watershed. The green is the Menominee River watershed. The purple is the Kinnickinnic. The blue at the bottom is Oak Creek. And then the gray is Root River. So we're at the tail end or downstream end of the Milwaukee River. The Menominee River runs right through downtown Milwaukee, and we're the headwaters for the Root. So what we've really tried to do is to adopt an approach where we're managing water where it falls. And that's in the urban, suburban, and rural areas, which means we're working with farmers, excuse me, we're working with communities in the urban setting, trying to manage stormwater so that it does not become floodwater, and trying to manage stormwater so that there's less pollutants running off into the waterways and keep that stormwater out of the combined sewer system as well. And we're looking to try to invest our dollars where it has the most impact. Next slide. This was the one of the first projects. So I told you we had a flood management authority. This used to be a neighborhood of probably 40 homes in the area. They flooded all the time. This is on the Menominee River. And what we did was we purchased those homes, moved those folks to nearby neighborhoods, and created this park with an underground stormwater storage system to reduce the basement backups in the area. You can see a levee along the back end of that picture, and in the upper left in the middle, you'll see the pump house that pumps the water out of that underground storage vessel into the Menominee River after the storm passes. So now we have an area that's not only functioning as a stormwater management facility, but it's also providing flood management, stormwater management protections to the area. Next slide. Same issue here. This is Hart Park. This is in Wauwatosa, one of the suburban areas, and this had about 75 homes on it. One of my first public meetings in 1998 was for this project, and at that time, people were flooding significantly throughout the area. We went in and purchased those homes. We lowered what we call lowered the floodplain. So we lowered the area in the floodplain area, and that State Street, that road that you see across the top of that park area, is really just a raised area that is now a levee that people don't even know it's a levee, to protect the homes and the businesses on the other side of that road, but allows this area to flood when it happens to get those large storms. We went in and we took out a lot of concrete lining, naturalized it as much as we could, and this picture on the bottom shows that waterway. Next slide. And this is County Grounds. This is the largest flood management facility in the state of Wisconsin. We built this in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And in engineering lingo, this is a retention pond, but when you are out there, it's really a recreational facility now. We built maintenance trails around the waterway that's there, and those maintenance trails have become bike trails. We have a natural vegetation. We use vegetation management techniques to keep it from being invasive. We're always battling that, of course, but it operates during very large storms, controls flows on the Menominee River to prevent flooding downstream, which would be through the central part of Milwaukee. So it's a huge project. Now, the picture on the bottom right, some of my commissioners, myself, and then the person on the right is Tom Barrett, who was recently the mayor, and he retired. Next slide. This is the project we're working on right now. This is the Kinnickinnic River, where I showed you that picture of the flooding before on the bridge. That concrete line channel, that's a straight shot right to Lake Michigan. We are working now to naturalize that, really to provide a green corridor through one of the most urbanized, lowest income areas in the region, and try to bring back nature to that community for public health reasons, for flooding reduction reasons, just for it's just a positive for the community to be able to have a space like this. So we are actively in the construction of this now. We've done 2 reaches of the watershed already. We're doing the design for one of the county parks right now that we're going to retrofit to be another stormwater management facility. Next slide. This is Underwood Creek. If I'd shown you this picture 10 years ago, you would have seen a trapezoidal concrete line channel. And looking at these pictures, you would not know that you're in the middle of an urban setting. On the right picture, you can see kind of a highway bridge in the right back area. But this is a natural creek now, the way it should have been and was. And there's houses on either side of it that you just don't see anymore in these pictures. But this is a 100-year flood protection project that returned to nature with the work that we did. And we're seeing fish spawning up through the waterway now that we didn't see before. Next slide. So I'm kind of taking you through an evolution of how we started some of this stuff 25 years ago, which was building off the deep tunnel system, really manage those CSOs as much as we can. And as you were talking about earlier, Jesus, you said, you know, you've got the low-hanging fruit. Now you're really trying to get the next step. We were in that same place. And so we really relied on and improved the operation of the deep tunnel system to reduce CSOs. Then we went into that flood management work that I just showed you pictures of, because if you can keep the water in the creek, it's not getting into people's basements, which then go into the floor drains, which are then connected to the sewer system, which then help us reduce overflows if we can keep that water out of those basements. Plus, it keeps the water out of people's basements. So we're kind of working upstream from the tunnel to the flood management projects. And now we're talking about green infrastructure or natural infrastructure. And this has been going on since 2002. We call it the Fresh Coast 740 program. And we took the vision of a half-inch capture by green infrastructure, and we calculated how much water that would be over the entire service area. And at that time, it was 740 million gallons. So that's the significance of the 740. So we are out there building green infrastructure, striving to get to that 740 million gallon number. Right now, we're at about 130, 140 million gallons, and trying to manage water where it falls. If we can hold it on the property, on the businesses, on the homes, hold that water and allow it to infiltrate in or utilize it, we reduce pollutant runoff. We also reduce the risk of flooding in CSOs. Next slide. So here's just some of the pictures. You know, flooding on the bottom right, that's probably around 2009, 2010. We get heavy rainstorms, trying to minimize flooding, basement backups, and CSOs. And also, I've not talked about it, but stream bank erosion as well. Next slide. So we've got several programs that I'm going to go through that we have implemented and are implementing. We fund this every year through our capital improvement budget, our CIP. but we're trying to reduce the amount of wastewater that we have to clean, because if it's stormwater and we can allow it to be cleaned naturally and run off to the rivers, then we don't have to pass it through our wastewater treatment plants. We're trying to keep clear water out of the system. We've got a private property inflow and infiltration program, which I don't have in this presentation, but working to reduce the inflow that's coming and infiltration that's coming into the laterals from the house to the street. That's about $5 million a year that we fund there. We have been in compliance with our permit practically since I've been here. In 25 years, I think we've only had 2 permit violations, and they were all garnered all this work towards the 2035 vision. This picture is a suburbs of Fox Point, and this was a new development, and they came to us and we funded this green infrastructure around the facility to reduce the runoff and the impacts of this development. Next slide. We have different types of green infrastructure that we pay for: rain gardens, rain barrels, green roofs, bioswales, trees, depaving parking lots, and so forth. One of the most fulfilling projects we have is our Green Schools program, where we are taking asphalt that's not used very much. It was built mostly to lower maintenance, replacing that asphalt with natural areas for the students to play and learn in. And it's just really fulfilling to see a classroom of kids out there playing in an area that's also a stormwater management facility. Next slide. Here's kind of the timeline. Like I said, I started in 1998, head of engineering. 2002, I became executive director. So we just started the Green Seams program, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then we came along with a best management practice partnership program. Then went to the regional green roof program, the what we call the GIP, the Green Infrastructure Partnership Program, GIPP. And all of these projects or programs are still going now, up till most recently in 2022. When President Biden came in, I could see a strong emphasis coming on climate change. So we started a reforestation and wetland program, which I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. So this is the GIPP, the Green Infrastructure Partnership Program. This is basically a competitive grant program where we pay up to 50% of the green infrastructure cost. We try to keep those costs at about $1.95 per gallon. This can be on public or private land. We're really looking for developers and champions, people to really take this and move it forward on their own. And once we get done, we put a conservation easement on that land, because we need to have some form of asset to show that the investment that we made with public dollars has an asset that's associated with it. Next slide. We also do the Green Solutions program. This is a reimbursement program for the municipalities. When we started green infrastructure in 2001, 2002, the biggest naysayers were the city engineers, because there was no way to document, a for sure improvement to water improvements. And that was because we were only looking at stormwater management. We weren't looking at all the other benefits that are brought with it. So we started a program where we reimbursed the municipalities to put green infrastructure into road projects, into redevelopments that they're managing. We put a 10-year easement on that. Minimum projects are $25,000. If they don't spend the money, we roll in 2 years. We roll that over as a $300,000 cap that we then distribute to other communities. So it really gives the municipality a incentive to use the funding as we bring it out. And this is a bioswale that you'll see that's actually the old Pabst Brewery. We're known for our breweries in Milwaukee, and this is a redevelopment of one of those breweries. Next slide. And about 4 or 5 years ago, it was actually 2020, we started a public-private partnership for green infrastructure, where we're hiring one team to go out and do the real estate, the public involvement, the design, all the activities up to construction. We approve the project. They get it through to the design phase, plans and specs. We bid it out as a public document, and then they oversee the construction. The benefit of the public-private partnership is the nimble approach that they can take with moving these projects forward. Plus, we do not pay a dime on these projects until they're fully operational and they can prove that the number of gallons that they said they were going to get from the project actually materializes. So we do not have payments on these projects until the very end, which my CFO likes. It's a good cash flow for us and we can see it coming. But it really it provides the incentive for them to get the projects done and to meet the specs that we had started with. Next slide. This project started several years ago. This is a green highway project. I actually got this from Atlanta. So I went to some conference that we were at and was talking to someone and we were looking out at this interstate that had all these overpasses. And I said, well, that's a great collection system for water because they're sending it down these downspouts off the interstate and just going into the paved area and the combined sewer system. So what we did was we partnered with the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, and especially the DOT, the Department of Transportation for the state, has been a great partner on this. And we design, construct, and manage these projects to take the water off those overpasses and put them into a natural setting. This picture is the Marquette overpass. And after we built it, the State Department of Natural Resources actually moved their offices across the street, which is a nice synergy because they help us maintain this once it's built. And we're on our third overpass now. We just approved the third one last month. So we're systematically going into some of these overpass areas in the urban area and trying to naturalize the setting underneath. Next slide. This is the green seams program. So this is really up in the upper areas of the watershed on that map that I showed you. Again, looking at the watershed approach as a whole. This project was started when I was in head of engineering in 2001. And what we thought was, we're always, with our flood management, we're always kind of the hamster in the wheel. We're always chasing the water and never getting ahead of it. And that's because as soon as we built a flood management facility, someone would put a development upstream that would send more water down to that facility. So we decided to go in and start purchasing land. And we actually do an outright purchase. We're partnered with the Conservation Fund on this program, where we purchase land that is either formerly a wetland or in the floodplain, trying to preserve these natural spaces. So we're not forcing that water downstream onto an urban area or someone else. We're targeting larger sites that we do this on. And when we did this starting in 2001, it was really for flood management. But as we've moved forward, we've learned that this is a huge benefit for climate adaptation. And so we're starting to revegetate, re-tree some of these sites, as you can see with this one. And it started out as a very controversial program, but now we have people coming to us wanting to be part of the Green Seams program. One of the first public meetings on this was in Oak Creek, and I had to go and talk about the acquisition of some farmland there. And I was sitting in the front talking to the village board, and there was a crowd of people behind me. And it wasn't a very conducive crowd to what I was talking about. They ended up having to call the police to have them escort me out to my car after the meeting. So it started out very controversial. People thought we were going to come in and just use eminent domain, but we didn't take that approach. This is a fee simple. It's only if the property owner is willing to sell. And now we've got 3,000 acres, I think, or more of land. I think it's 3,500 acres of land right now that's in the Green Seams program. Next slide. We have a dashboard where we monitor this. As you can see, we're at about 140 million. This is targeted towards that 740. So we've got 600 more million to go. And we look at the type of green infrastructure that we're building. You can see that on the right with the columns on the different types. With that Green Solutions program that I talked about, bioswales are really popular because the communities are rebuilding some of their local roads, and they're taking the medians or the the shoulders, and they're putting bioswales there to capture the runoff from those roads. So that's why you see that being such a prominent item on those graphs. And then you see the money spent as well. Next slide. We have a neighborhood outreach program. We employ about 20 to 25 interns every year. And most of these folks are interns. The gentleman with the glasses, second from the left, is one of my commissioners. He's the mayor of Oak Creek. But we pick neighborhoods each year. We go out to those neighborhoods and talk about green infrastructure. We call it the Fresh Coast program. These are our Fresh Coast Guardians. And we're at people's front yards, disconnecting downspouts from the combined sewer area, putting in rain gardens, rain barrels, really educating those communities. The Milwaukee 30th Street corridor is probably another one of the lowest income Black neighborhoods in Milwaukee. And we just have a continuous program there because there is it's not equitable the way we see flooding and basement backups in our region. So we really want to target these neighborhoods to try to do what we can to bring natural settings to their neighborhood, but also reduce that runoff problem that they have. Next slide. And this is the program that I started in 2022. I started it thinking we would just reforest the watershed, and this is the entire watershed. It's not just my sewer service area. But we started talking to Ducks Unlimited, who does a lot of work around the country. And DU was very strong on the wetland restoration. So we combined the two, and it's the Reforestation and Wetland Restoration Program. We've set a goal to plant 6 million trees, restore 4,000 acres of wetlands in our watersheds, and really have it as both public and private property. And then we put a conservation easement on the land. This is actually one of my employees who's out. We have a community day where we go out and do work on different projects, and he's out planting trees in a nature center that we partner with. Next slide. And this is, I think, the last slide. This is the Working Soils program. So we had the Green Seams Initiative going where we were purchasing land, putting a conservation easement on it, and returning it to natural setting. But we had a lot of farmland where farmers wanted to continue farming and did not want to lose that ability. So we created the Working Soils program where we partner with the farmers. This is a partnership with USDA and NRCS. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program is in the Ag Bill. So we received 2 rounds of funding for that so far. We take that federal funding, we match it with our local funding, and we basically put that out into the farming community to work with them to have better farming practices so that they might use a no-till approach, or they may do other approaches to try to reduce the runoff, but also reduce the pollutant load. In our watersheds, phosphorus is a big concern for pollutant loads in the waterways. So we're working towards water quality and flood management with this program. And the farmers have been great. I mean, the farming community has really stepped forward, and it's been a great partnership. I think that, oh, I'm sorry, I got area of concern in here. You may not care about the area of concern, but on the Great Lakes, we have a program that EPA started called the Area of Concern. And we had like a 10-year lawsuit between the Milwaukee Riverkeeper and Milwaukee County over this dam that you see on the upper left picture. The county wanted to rebuild it. The Riverkeeper did not. And so we stepped in. The county sold us the dam for $1, and we tore the dam out. This is just after deconstruction of the dam, the bottom right picture. We removed the dam, restored the waterway to its natural setting, reduced the flooding impacts upstream that dam was causing, and ended up recouping all of our funding through both state and federal programs. So it's been a win-win for the community. Next slide. I don't know if you want to see this or not, but we have a dredge material management facility that started construction last year. We're building a large bathtub basically along the lakefront. That's the hatched red area that you see on the upper left picture. where once it's built, the EPA is going to come in and dredge the contaminated material out of the bottom of our estuary and place it in this container system. It'll sit there for 25 years, and then once it settles, it'll become either parkland or more harbor space. But this just shows that as we've kind of matured as a sewer district and as a region, we've gone from CSOs to flood management to green infrastructure, and now they're asking us to take part in projects that weren't originally in our jurisdiction. So we had to get some help from the state legislature to change our jurisdictional limits. Next slide. Hit it again. That's weird. So if you hit it one more time, this is a video. Oop, nope, sorry, it won't run. Okay, there's a video on that. This is the Clutch Dam Fish Passage that we built last year, went online in December of 2023. And this is another area of concern project where EPA paid us to do the work. We actually built a fish passage around a low head dam that was in the area that the community wanted to keep. So this is now operational, and one of those where we kind of stepped out again and did more than what we have in our jurisdictional limits. Next slide. A lot of community involvement. We've captured the One Water, Our Water theme. We go out to communities and talk about what they can do, individuals, neighborhoods, what they can do to reduce the runoff or the use of water in their homes. A lot of it is really starting to be more towards jobs because there's a large contingent of folks that would really benefit from some of the good paying jobs that either the climate change initiatives that we have or with operators of treatment plants. We're really trying to connect those career pathways with through this public engagement as well. Next slide. And we consider ourselves an anchor institution. This is one of our green infrastructure projects. The lady on the left is my project manager for this project. And so we've understood that as an anchor institute, we're going to be here 100 years from now. We need to take that long vision and really try to not only do the flood management, wastewater treatment, but we need to impact the social and equity lenses of the area and try to improve the economy at the same time. So it's every utility in the country is an anchor utility or institution, and that's the approach they should be taking. Next slide. And that's the last slide. When I moved here in 1997, 1998, we never had kayaks on the rivers. People were afraid of the rivers because they thought they were very polluted. We had beaches that were closed because of overflows. We still have a few beach closings. Those don't happen as much as they did before. But we're seeing the benefit not only from the numbers, the water quality benefits, the less CSOs, but just the public perception, and people are enjoying the waterways more today. So, and I just like the saying from Mother Teresa. So thank you. I hope this helped. I hope it was what you wanted, and I can take any questions if you have any.
Kevin, thank you so much. I mean, each one of these slides is blowing my mind, much less, I mean, you're as a, speaking from the water advocacy side, and I'm guessing I'm speaking for many of us, you are doing the things that we want to see being done. And so I want to ask, so I'm going to start with a few questions, and then we'll go to the many wonderful questions in the chat. You said you had one of the slides a couple slides ago, we stepped out and did more than what is in our jurisdictional limits. It seems like that is a theme, that you did that many times. How did you get from being a sewer district to taking on flooding and thinking regionally and all these other, like, what was that? What was that transition? I heard police presence at one point, but so it sounds like there's a book and maybe a movie in the works. Yeah. But how did you get from here to there?
Yeah, if you ever want to go to sleep, I can write a book and that'll put you right out. Yeah. When I started in 1998, we already had the Flood Management Authority, so that was already there. But because we were so involved with building the deep tunnel, involved with all the other work of the treatment plant, we really hadn't done a lot with the flood management component of it. But then we got hit with large storms in 97, 98, 99, and that, forced us into doing more with flood management. That was one where it was in our jurisdiction, we did it. the green infrastructure, natural infrastructure, sometimes, I know there's some lawyers on the call, sometimes it's how you read the statute. And we read the statute that stormwater management becomes floodwater management. So you better manage it where it falls, or else it's going to be flooding downstream. That's been fine. That's how we did the natural infrastructure, just an extension of our flood management authority. The one that we stepped out on was the area of concern work. And we actually went to the legislature in 2021 and got them to give us a change to the statutes to allow us to do that work. We have to complete the work by 2032, but again, we worked with them. And I thought it was going to be an easy sell. We said, we're not asking for money. We're just asking you to change this one line in the statute that'll allow us to do the work. It took us 1.5 years to get that one line changed, but it happened. So sometimes you just have to push the envelope.
Okay, so it sounds like leadership is part of that. So there's a theme. My next question for you, compared to Boston, Milwaukee is in some ways at an advantage because even though you have a much larger CSO network, you have many fewer CSO events each year. Can you talk a bit about why you pursued tunneling first and not sewer separation, and what lessons you think we could learn from here in Boston?
I didn't even talk about the water pollution abatement program. So this goes back to after the Clean Water Act passed in 1972. I told you that the state of Illinois sued over overflows going into Lake Michigan, which is going down to Chicago. And as an outcome of that lawsuit and lawsuits from the DNR and others, in the mid to early 80s, we went through what we call the Water Pollution Abatement Program, WPAP. And in that program, we looked at a variety of alternatives. Again, this was before me, but we looked at a variety of alternatives on how to control CSOs, combined sewer overflows. And it came down to we could go into every building and separate sewers in the streets, or we could build a deep tunnel. And at the time, they decided the economic impact of modifying buildings, modifying combined sewers and streets was too expensive. So they decided to go with the deep tunnel system at that time. So when I started in 98, the first tunnel had come online in 93, which was from that pollution abatement program. That was 405 million gallons. Now I've added another 116 million gallons since I've been here. Tunnels are great. They've done a wonder for improving our water quality here. They're expensive. They take time to build, and you don't get some of the other climate benefits that you might get with the natural infrastructure and the natural flood management.
Thank you. And then my last question before turning it over to the chat is, can you talk a bit more about your approach to green infrastructure? For example, how targeting 1/2 inch of rainfall, your impact of your CSO control in Milwaukee. How did you pick that threshold and volume?
I wish I could say there was a study or an analysis that said, oh, this is the number we have. But in 2009, I felt a little desperate. So I wrote this vision, and I really was just sitting there, and I thought, okay, we've got the deep tunnel in line right now. I really don't worry about a storm that's less than 2 inches of rain with the deep tunnel. And I thought, well, what could we add on top of that 2-inch rainfall? And I just picked a 1/2 inch out of the air. And it really was just picking a number. Someone can come back and say, well, that number is wrong. Okay. But at the time, it was a start, right? Someone may come back 5 years, 10 years from now and say it needs to be 1 inch or 2 inches. But so I just picked it. And we started the green infrastructure with the rain barrel program. And that was because we were seeing that in some other places around the country. And it was really like a shotgun approach. Just anyone that wanted to do it, you could do it. We'd provide the barrels, sell them to you, so forth. That morphed into bioswales and green roofs and rain gardens. And now we're working with Marquette University, and they're doing some modeling for us. We will have that this summer sometime that will really help us target where the most benefit from the green infrastructure will be, and we'll target those areas moving forward. But when we do build green infrastructure. We use the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index as a index to look at for where we can provide both a social and economic benefit to some of these areas that have high vulnerability. So that's part of our selection process on project locations. I don't know if that answered your question, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's super helpful. So we've got a lot of great questions, and so I'll just jump right in. Andrea Downs asked, does the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District include stormwater systems as well as sewers?
No, we do not have, we're an MS4 permit. We're not a stormwater permittee, but I have 28 different municipalities and each of them have a stormwater permit. So we work with them. The green infrastructure that we install helps them with their permit. So, but we do not own we are not part of an MS4 permit.
Okay. Ms. Hiller from Somerville asked, what were the funding mechanisms for the deep tunnels and what are the funding mechanisms now?
When the original deep tunnel was built before I came, there's this wonderful program called the Construction Grant Program, and that paid for about 45 to 50% of that first deep tunnel, the 405 million gallons that was put online. Since that has gone away, it's become the Clean Water Fund Loan Program, loan versus grant. So we have to pay the loan back. We pay for all of that through our capital improvement budget, which is a property tax that we charge for the area.
Okay, thank you. Kristen from Save the Alewife Brook asked, what's the ROI on the super cool landfill gas project?
Super cool, huh? Sorry, it's turning my phone off. It's dinging at me. So we signed a 25-year agreement with the landfill to provide that gas to us, and they have to provide it at a certain quality that we've dictated in the contract. And if I remember correctly, the payoff on the pipeline and the turbines was somewhere around 13 to 14 years.
Thank you. John Salo asks, what is the advantage of having flood management stormwater as part of your responsibility versus a wastewater agency that doesn't have that responsibility?
John nailed it. That is the big difference. That allows us to look at the surface water more and how to manage that stormwater and that flood water versus just waiting till the water gets in the pipes. So it's that whole focus of moving upstream and trying to address the water. So it's a huge benefit that really allows a lot of flexibility in managing water.
So if you were a water management organization in the Boston area, you would actually see an advantage to expanding the mission.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's all regional, so you need a regional approach to these things.
Right. John Sullivan, who I assume is from Boston Water
John.
and Sewer. Have you, John?
Hi, John.
How are you, Kevin? And I wasn't trying to stump you. It was a simple question.
I didn't know you were on. It's good to see you.
Yeah, John, why don't you ask your question directly?
Well, it's actually the half inch. I was wondering if you picked it out of the air like we picked our 1 inch out of the air, and you already answered that.
Yep.
And I just wondering is it a volume problem? Because with obviously 1 inch of rain, I'm not sure how your rainfall is, but 90% of our storms are 1 inch and less. So we capture 90% of the problem. And that's where we came up with our number. We actually had rationale. We didn't totally pick it out of the air. And I was just wondering, what does that do for you? What does the half inch do? If you can get from now on, go to the 1 inch, would that increase the value of these? Obviously, it'll have some increase, but would it make a material difference? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is a volume issue. We have a deep tunnel. It has a defined volume. So if we can keep that half inch of water on the surface in green infrastructure, we keep that water out of the tunnel system, and that preserves that space for sanitary flows that we have. So it is a volume issue, and adding that half inch of green infrastructure on top of the plus or minus 2 inches that I feel comfortable with the tunnel provide. When we get there, we're not there yet. We're still building towards that. But that is starting. I think we're starting to see some of the benefits of that, and if nothing else, less street flooding in some of the areas.
So I'm going to cheat and ask you one more question since I have the floor.
Okay.
when you help someone build green infrastructure in their private property, do you mandate that they maintain that forever? I heard you said you took a conservation easement on it, but do they have to maintain it, or do you pay to maintain it?
Depends on what the green infrastructure is. If it's a rain barrel that they're putting on the downspout of a house, it's just up to the homeowner. We're expecting, there's nothing that says you have to, but we're expecting them to do that. If it's a bioswale along a roadway or a green roof, we actually put a conservation easement on the land and the owner has to maintain it. So City of Milwaukee, if they put a bioswale in, they have to maintain it. We'll pay for part of the construction, but they have to maintain it.
Oh, that's excellent. And that's all I had. It was a great talk, by the way.
It was good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Thank you, John. Next up, Jean Benson asks, in this area, I see combined sewer communities installing bike lanes rather than bioswales on the edges of roadways. Have you encountered that? And if so, how can bike lanes and bioswales both be accommodated?
We're starting to see more of that. This whole complete street approach, I think is the term on the transportation side, where you add bike lanes to roadways. So we're starting to see it, but I don't know of any conflict that we've had yet. We've had several streets that have been converted to bike lane and roads, but I think there's still bioswales there as well. We have many roads where it's one way lane each direction, then a parking lane on each side. We've had some reckless driving issues in this area. So what we're seeing the city and other communities do is add those bike lanes, but also put the bioswale in that parking lane that was there before to really reduce some of that reckless driving. So it's a safety approach as well. But we're probably on the very early cusp of some of that.
Okay. Andrea Downs asks, what percentage of the CSO in Milwaukee is treated, and what do you see as the harms of treated CSOs?
Well, 98.56% of, I don't know if you saw that pop up, 98.5% of all the water that comes to the system is treated. So it gets primary, secondary disinfection. So we treat those flows at the treatment plants. It's that 1.44 or 1.5% that is not treated. We are looking at one of our pump stations to maybe convert it to a treatment facility up in the system, so not at the treatment plants. If you can treat it, that's great, but there's a cost to that. There's a maintenance cost and a capital cost to that. So it's something you just have to work with. But of course, if you can treat the CSO, I would do it.
Thank you. So Patrick Heron from Mystic River Watershed Association asks, what lessons do you take from applying green infrastructure in your most densely urbanized areas?
It's hard. It's expensive. It's difficult to find areas to do it. That 30th Street corridor that I talked about with the neighborhood outreach slide, that's one of those areas where it's just concrete and asphalt and buildings everywhere. But you try to find those locations where sometimes it's a empty lot that's not being used and you can convert that into a green space. It's really trying to just find those little nuggets within those areas, but it's more expensive than green infrastructure in a more rural suburban setting.
Thank you. So David Stoff asks, can you describe the water drop alert program?
Yeah, I didn't even talk about that, so someone's heard about it. Yes. So if we get a rainfall forecast of over an inch of rain, and I feel comfortable up to 2 inches, but we'll issue an alert that asks, in fact, we issued one this week, that we ask folks to use less water in their homes. So if they can postpone that dishwasher run or, take a shorter shower, whatever it is. So they send that out, people register for it on their phones. It comes up as an alert when they go out. And we're just trying to educate people mostly about the impact they have on the bigger system.
Have you seen that be effective?
We've seen it effective from the public understanding standpoint. As far as seeing it from reduced flows, it's very hard to tell. I mean, you get a 3-inch or a 2-inch rainfall, it's all coming at you. But from a public acceptance, I mean, we actually issued it late this time, later than we normally do. And I had people calling me going, why didn't you issue the water drop alert? So it's really been that public education piece, which has been the biggest component.
And I'm guessing that public education and understanding is helpful for having support for trying to do the more ambitious things you're doing.
Yeah.
Gwen Spieth asks, did you have in Milwaukee or have you seen anywhere a good on-site real-time beacon light CSO discharge notification system along rivers and streams?
A beacon light? Hold on 1 second, sorry. Everyone calls me when I'm on these. You said a beacon light system?
Any kind of live notification system that's effective, like red light, sewage discharge.
So we don't have anything like that, but you can go to our website right now, MMSD.com, and there's a weather page on that website. It's updated every 5 minutes, and it will tell you how much water's in the tunnel, whether we're having a combined sewer overflow, which it still shows that we haven't turned it off yet, and how much we're treating at the 2 treatment plants. We also have a program that we're working with an artist out of New York City, Mary Miss, where we are putting in what we call watermarks. And those are going to be areas where once we see a heavy rainfall forecast, there will be lighting on that, and there will be messages that go out to those areas telling them to, try to use less water. We have a tall smokestack at our Jones Island plant that we're going to put a light on, hopefully in the next couple of years. And if it's green, everything's good. If it's red, it tells people to use less water. So nothing at each location, Gwen, like you're talking about, but trying to look at it more from a regional approach.
Thank you. Catherine Lang from Mass Rivers Alliance asked, you mentioned that the deep tunnels are at capacity from this year's storm. Are there concerns about the deep tunnels capacity with future precipitation projections?
Yeah, so it's at capacity because of this week's storm. We got close to 3 inches of rain here on Tuesday and Wednesday. Yeah, so we're always looking to answer the question, are we worried about the capacity in the future with the changing climate that we're seeing? We are. We do a facilities plan that right now is the target year is 2035 with an outlook year of 2050. And in those facilities plans, we look at future projections of development. We look at future rainfall forecasts. And we build into that facility plan what we want to do to either meet regulatory requirements or do better than regulatory requirements. And that's where we look to see if we need to add more tunnel space. That's why we've had the 2 tunnels added since I've been here. Right now with the 2035 plan, we're not seeing the need for more tunnels, but to try to expand the green infrastructure program.
Fabulous. Julie Wood, CRWA's Climate Resilience Director, said, agreed with all that this is a great presentation, very impressive work, particularly love the many large-scale projects you described that benefit the CSO system and the community. Can you talk about the role of the community activists or community members in those projects? Were any of the ideas generated by the community, or were they all from your sewer district?
I can't tell you on all of them whether they generated them or not. I can tell you when I started in 1998, we had a rocky relationship with some of the environmental groups in the area. They were suing us. In fact, they did sue us. And, that probably, yeah,
we've done that a few times.
Yeah, and that went till about 2007, 2008. And we won one of the lawsuits against us. And I remember my head lawyer coming in going, we won. And I said, no, we lost. They said, no matter how you look at it, the lawsuit is a loss for the community. So I reached out, and I still meet monthly with the executive director of the Riverkeeper and other groups, really bringing them into the partnership. The clutch dam removal that I showed the pictures of, the area of concern project, it was the Riverkeeper that was in that 10-year lawsuit with the county, and we worked with the Riverkeeper to remove the dam. May not have won some friends at the county with that project, but it's better for the environment. So we rely heavily on the environmental community. They help us with so many things. We help pay for a river cleanup every year that they implement. One of the things, if there's a lesson learned, is you just can't do all of this yourself, and you need folks that are experts in really touching the public or more in tune to some of the water quality issues in the neighborhoods that we need to have their input on.
So it sounds like you're saying that partnering with your watershed groups and water protection groups is actually helpful and reduces your litigation costs and makes you more effective.
Yeah, we don't have any litigation right now from environmental groups. Actually, I don't think we have any litigation right now. It does reduce litigation costs, but it just makes projects better. You know, some of the large flood management projects that I showed you, there's a lot of public input on that, a lot of work with the environmental community on that, neighborhood groups. And they're, I guess to your ask of, did they come in with ideas? During those discussions, they did. They'll come in and they say, well, we want this to look more like that. You know, so we have the basic understanding of what we need for a flood management, but then they come in and make it look like something that the neighborhood will accept and help maintain.
And Catherine Lang from Mass Rivers Alliance has another question. Curious to know about how the munis pay into the sewer district and if those rates have changed under your shift to green infrastructure, especially since your work benefits their MS4 compliance.
Yep. So we have two budgets at MMSD. One is an operation and maintenance budget. That budget is paid for through usage. So it's paid for by flow, number of connections to the sanitary sewer system. And then for the industrial load, we look at both the biochemical oxygen demand and the total suspended solids that industry send us. We put that into an equation and that comes up with what our user charge rate is that we charge people for the O&M budget. The capital budget, as I said before, is based on property tax. And so the municipalities pay property tax to us, all 28 of them. And that's used for wastewater treatment, flood management, natural infrastructure, green seams, all that.
Okay, great. I'm going to give, see, this might be the last one, second to last one. Catherine, again, curious to hear more about the flood management parks and how the district relocated residents. Massachusetts is just beginning to have the relocation conversation, mostly on the coast, and it's really thorny. That's an understatement. Did residents understand the risk and support the move? How long was the outreach in those cases before the move? And then the last angle on the question, because it's as if it wasn't complicated enough, how did the district become experts on preventing gentrification in the process, if you did?
I was going to say on that last one, I'm not sure you're experts on that. So the Connecticut River Flood Management Project is a good example. We had an area where that was concrete line channel. The homes had built up to the edge of that concrete line channel and they were flooding because the storms had changed. And the concrete was failing and we needed to replace it. And so we wanted to go in with a natural liner as opposed to a concrete liner, which means the floodplain expands. So there were 74 homes and businesses along these reaches of the Connecticut River. And we just started public outreach. Here's another example where we worked with a neighborhood group. And it literally came down to one public meeting that I went to, and they had members of the group there, and they said, okay, we're going to vote at the end of this meeting whether we want to sell our homes and move or stay where we're at. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, no pressure there. So I went through, there's some other words I said, but anyway, we went through the presentation, and at the end I said, so I know you're going to vote, but just know if you vote this down, you're going to have flooding, you're going to have water in your basements, you're going to have walls failing on your basements, and we'll pay you a fair market price for your property and help pay relocation costs as well. And it ended up passing. So they wanted us to go ahead with it. So there's some, as I said before with the green seams, there's some not so fun meetings that you go to, but you just have to be truthful with folks and lay out, you know, what the options are. The gentrification, like I said, I don't know that we're experts on that. That is a concern as we start greening up some of these areas, but we're trying to integrate our work with the neighborhood that's there now so that, you know, it fits into the neighborhood more, and we're still going to have some of those issues. We're just haven't got there yet. Did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, no, that was great. It sounds like you made it just very crystal clear to people what they would be facing if they chose to stay. And as much as you might like your, you know, love your home, the idea of going through that, you know, which I think we're still not there. Massachusetts is one of the states that does not require disclosure of past flood incidents in a home. So people are buying homes, renting homes that have flooded out, and they're not even aware. So we really have some work to do there on making that bringing that transparency to people. Joe Nerdin asks, what percentage of MMSD's total budget is allocated to flood management, and how is it funded?
It's funded through the capital improvement program. A guess on the percent, because I don't have it here in front of me, I would say 20%, 25% is our flood management green infrastructure program. I can look up a number and send it to you later, but off the top of my head, I think that's about right. The biggest place where we've got a 10-year capital improvement plan. The biggest investment we're making is in the plants right now because they're old and they need upgrading. So we're constantly, as John and others are doing, constantly putting money into our treatment plants to try to become more efficient and to keep the systems working.
We're going to let John Salo have the last question. And I'm going to expand on a little bit. So he asks, what other large wastewater agencies in the US have made significant progress on CSO stormwater management? And I would just add, like we heard that you look to Atlanta. Who do you look to for leadership as we are, looking to catch up to where you are? What other model agencies around the country should we be looking at?
Well, to John's question, I think if you went back to 1972, every single utility in the country has done a good job of addressing CSOs because the Clean Water Act came in and that forced a lot of us to do what we needed to do. So I think there's been a lot of really good work by a lot of utilities throughout the country. And we're so much better off today than we were in 72 from a water quality standpoint. We don't have burning rivers and all that stuff. Who do I look to? It was Philadelphia for a while on the green infrastructure. Portland, I was out there. LA's doing some cool stuff. Atlanta. Everyone's got their nugget. Everyone's got a nugget of something they're really doing well. And if you can bring those nuggets together, then it really makes for a better program here or wherever. So I go to different conferences and I look to see what someone's doing that I like. Something we stole from Cleveland, not stole, but borrowed their idea from Cleveland was an ambassador program. So they had folks that were out walking projects, and when people asked questions, they answered them. So we developed a Fresh Coast Ambassadors program, and now we use part of the intern program that I talked about and have those young individuals. We educate them on the projects, and then they're out walking the neighborhoods talking about it. So there's just different ideas all around.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your experience and your wisdom. I am sure that this is going to cause ripples, if you will, here in Boston and beyond. So really, really grateful for the folks attending. Thank you so much for being here. We have recorded it. We will be sharing it along, I believe, with Kevin's slides. So thank you. And keep up the great work.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kevin.